that aircraft are maintained or drive the need for aircraft maintenance plans. During the discussion, our panelists will tackle the questions: do you need a maintenance program in COVID-19 environment? I'm not flying, so why do I need coverage? We'll also compare the cost of not having an aircraft maintenance plan versus having one, and hear from Peter Zeeb, who is a former Honeywell customer, currently with the Van Allen Group. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Avionics. I'll be moderating this webinar and handing it off to our presenters shortly here. We're going to start off the webinar with a brief polling question that we'd like to get some information from the audience about your interest in this topic. So if you could please take a look at the polling question that we are now opening, and we will go ahead and get started. And if you look in the Q&A tab, you should see that polling question pop up shortly. And while we let the viewers take the polling question, I will now hand it off to our first speaker, Paul David. He is the Senior Director of Aftermarket Maintenance Services for Honeywell Aerospace.
Yeah, thanks very much, Woodrow. Good morning. My name is Paul David. I lead the MSP sales organization here at Honeywell Aerospace. And I'd like to first offer my thanks to Avionics International and the team for helping us put this together, and offer my thanks to you as well for sharing your. Just stated, we're learning to operate in the new normal. Stating the obvious, it's challenging when we aren't able to meet face-to-face and discuss important topics like this, and what and how we should be thinking about our maintenance operations such that we're all ready for a recovering economy. I'm sure you're right in the middle of some sort of planning preparation with your principals return to service of your aircraft and operations. And as such, we wanted to take this time to help this thinking along and really just double check with you whether changes in your maintenance planning should take place. It's a great time to do this. Obviously, there are many things around us today that are influencing how we think about maintenance. For example, how much am I flying today? What is the forecast and demand for flying tomorrow and beyond? You know, how does that affect my planning for maintaining my current aircraft, or is it time to sell? Is it time to consider a different model? Is it time to consider charter or fractional? You know, how are industry supply chains affecting my ability to receive timely spares and repairs? All of these questions are being asked and decisions are taking place. So Avionics International, along with Van Allen and Honeywell, thought this would be a meaningful topic to reach out and help spur some discussion. To kick us off further, we listed a few of these key considerations here as well. Things like airworthiness. We know it's a top priority for all of us to remember to safely perform our flight operations and make sure when we're ready to do so to basically get our aircraft back in operation at minimal cost and low effort. The requirements for proper maintenance and inspection are even more important if your aircraft's been sitting idle during the crisis. As a car hot, my classic car, every month I run issues: seals drying up, training leaks, trickle charges not working, battery's dead, and another weekend underneath the car, and me going to the wife asking for financial approval to go fix something, which is a pretty tough out here lately. So it's important. You may be trying to sell your aircraft or prepping for demo flights or pre-buy inspections, and certainly you want to make sure that you minimize open squawks during that process. You want to make sure that you have you've completed scheduled maintenance and they're up to date with that. You're up to date with the current mod levels and updates to your flight decks, etc. And versus the other aircraft and the other guy trying to sell a similar platform. And really the question is does having an OEM maintenance program help in the evaluation and sale of that aircraft? Peter will share some data which may be insightful for you to consider relative to that question. So let's talk about planning and maintaining mission readiness. we know this requires you to power on and off the aircraft and run the aircraft, and arguably failures can occur with avionics and mechanical components, even if you're not quote unquote flying. We've seen this. We've seen an uptick in our exchange rates. A lot of people that are going through and doing maintenance, catching up on maintenance. And when you do the maintenance, basically you're turning on and off the aircraft, and then also in preservation state, you're doing the same. And a lot of times when you are putting power to the avionics equipment, things like DUs and ECUs, et cetera, there is an opportunity for that equipment once you introduce energy to fail. What you don't need is an unanticipated failure of that equipment. This is at best a major disruption requiring work stoppage. Large administration, we're typically working from home. We got kids going back to school. We're doing remote learning. We got other distractions. So going back to the principal to request additional funds that weren't budgeted for in today's environment is very challenging. This is, in fact, the narrative. The issues drive and absorb labor and effort on your part when you're trying to find budget, when you're trying to find access to inventory, who's got parts, technical support, and again, funds. So basically, maybe it's time to consider an OEM maintenance service program. I can share from experience, many of you are already reducing these complications and uncertainties through industry programs like Honeywell's MSP services, previously known as our HAP program and MPP program. And we certainly thank you for your business. Based on lower flight hours and lower demand for parts during the COVID environment, our supply chain has done a tremendous amount of work in recovering a lot of our gaps in the supply chain. And this has really helped our MSP performance and helped our customers enjoy immediate exchanges and access to OEM certified inventory like never before. To further help this line of thinking around, is this a good time to consider an OEM maintenance program? Karen's going to walk us through a few additional insights to help you in your decision making. Peter's also going to add his real world perspective as a DOM. And again, I just want to add my thanks very much, and I look forward to the discussion. Karen?
Thank you, Paul. So on this next slide, we're really looking at not having a maintenance program, and the question is but it's really so where do we go from here? What are the true costs? We have coverage gaps. That's a risk that you take when you don't have a maintenance program. So the coverage gap, they have already replaced this part, and it had a part warranty, but again, you have to look that up. You're not sure. So you have these coverage gaps, and now you have coverage expenses. We move over into the delays, and what happens when a part goes bad? When you actually have a failed part, you have two alternatives. You can take that out, send it in for repair, or you can exchange it in a lot of cases, right? Both of those cost time and money. Your aircraft is not going to get up right away. It's not going to be able to make a possible flight that you had for that day or the next even. By just getting a repair. With an exchange, we have more options to support, but again, it's time, and time is money, right? So those delays never help anybody. And then you have the increased administrative burden. This causes undue stress, actually. So you see your flight department running around trying to find out who has this part? How do we get this part? How do we order this part? Where do we send this part? What's the cost of these parts? Who do we have to go to for internal approval to get this expense approved? All of that is happening in your flight department, and your flight's canceled. And so what really is the value here? It's a lot of extra work where that flight department could be spending their time, working on something that would be a future business profit for you. So all of these increased activities are going on, and people are feeling scurried and stressed. And then you have the budget surprise. Once you get into a failure, you didn't plan for that. Right now, timing is kind of bad. As Paul mentioned, go back and ask that principal for possibly $50K or $100K for addressed. And then you have the budget surprise. Once you get into a failure, you didn't plan for that. Right now, timing is kind of bad. Funds are short, and you got to go, as Paul mentioned, go back and ask that principal for, possibly $58K or $100K for an exchange. That doesn't ever set well, and it just creates an atmosphere that is difficult to manage and difficult to be in and feel like you're being successful. That's the unexpected. That's what happens to a budget when something goes wrong. I mean, how long have you had the aircraft is another good question. Do you know what has failed in the last 3 years, last 5 years? If you know those things, you know that all along the way there's unexpected surprises, and that's what blows your budget. Next slide, please. So I've got a couple examples here. This first one is an example of the Honeywell solution for our MSP avionics coverage. And it's just an example of a G550 that's flying approximately 300 flight hours a year, and it has a standard configuration. Our cost for 2020 would average around $55,000 to have the maintenance service plan. Without it, you could possibly have a failure of a satellite data unit, which is 107K exchange, or an overhead unit, 124K. A unit assembly for SATCOM is 144K. You look at that cost, and that's 3 times the amount of what the annual maintenance fee would be for 80 plus parts on a G550. And that's just with one part, and your whole budget's gone. So it's a perfect example of how a maintenance budget, a maintenance service plan can help you budget and keep and stay within that. Next slide. And then again, here's an example on the mechanical component side. This one is for a G4, and there's approximately 55, 56 parts that are covered under the mechanical components agreement. These parts are reliable. We hear this all the time, and we know they're reliable. They're our parts, and so we're thankful for that. But you don't know when they're going to go, and when they do, a thermostat outline could be $331,000, whereas a maintenance service agreement would be $33,000. So it really highlights the idea of planning. And yes, some years you win. You have a lot of usage. You have a large component, large cost component go, and you think, whew, we got out of that one. We had that maintenance service plan. But some years, the equipment's really reliable and it doesn't fail, and you're paying that $33K. But if you average that out over a 10-year period of how many parts have failed on your aircraft that would be covered, that annual fee is just a small portion of it, and it makes it so that you can balance that budget, have a consistent fee year over year, and plan for it without the unexpected failure. Next slide. Okay, so now we have a poll question coming up, and it'll pop up on your screen here soon, but the question is, if you're on a program already, how would you rate the value of the program in this environment? Is it high, medium, low, or none? So we're going to go ahead and let you vote on that. Our participants, our views to see, how can maintenance programs be better for all of the operators out there. So thank you for answering these poll questions. All right, next we're going to move on. I'm happy to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Peter Zeeb. He has an impressive resume of working with business aviation jets in the past and managing flight departments. And I will let you go ahead and highlight your own experience, Peter. But welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you all for participating today. I do appreciate it, and it's an honor to be here. To give you a little quick background on myself, I've been a director of maintenance for over 32 years in the industry, working for both high net worth individuals, corporations. And the last two companies that I worked for, both Caesars and a high net worth individual out of the Pacific Northwest, were both with large cabin aircraft. And we had both of those fleets of airplanes, 6 aircraft with Caesars and 3 aircraft with the high net worth individual at Ochiko. We had them on HAP and MPP programs. And I can tell you that from examples that I had with my G5 on one occasion, the first year that I signed up for a 3-year term for the MPP program to cover the Honeywell air valves, I had a lot of pneumatic issues on that airplane. And it didn't take me long to see the figures when I got my report back from Honeywell and what I had ordered for the year, that I had paid for 3 years of service for the MPP on that alone. So I can tell you firsthand, as I run across clients now, anybody who's been on these plans, you knew. I've never heard anybody that not be on the plan. So it definitely has benefits that shows beyond just what we're explaining today. And I'd be more than happy to share some more details as time permits. And also, one of the things that I've been doing over the years as a director of maintenance, I've had a lot of dialogue with Honeywell over the years, because with my fleet of Falcons, we were one of the first airplanes to introduce the Epic platform. So I was a high utilization customer for Honeywell, and they reached out to me and wanted to know if I'd be willing to sit on a panel committee that at the time was just mainly a 731 committee that had started back in the late 70s, early 80s, and had developed into wanting to cover more of the product line for Honeywell. So they asked me if I'd be willing to participate on the avionics committee. And I said, sure, I think it'd be a great opportunity to share some of my experience. In 2005, we expanded the committee, the Global Customer Committee, to both mechanical, which was at the time engines, APUs, and air valve mechanical systems, to also now all avionics systems that Honeywell supports and distributes through the markets. So when we came on, we decided to delve in deeper into some of the areas that Honeywell was supporting, which was introducing these new programs to cover the avionics and air valves for various model aircraft. And what we're doing to this day on that committee as a whole is we're always watching how Honeywell is supporting their supply chain to get those components to you faster than any other vendor can do. And also making sure that our NFF returns are down, or no fault founds. We're monitoring that and through the specs department. So as a committee, we're very in tune to what Honeywell is doing in supporting the components as they go out to our customers. So I feel privileged to have that opportunity to have that data shared with us as a committee. So it's been tremendous for us to be on there. We've got over 45 customers on that committee, and within the United States, we're also in Europe and in Asia. And with the COVID, we haven't been able to meet face-to-face, which we miss, but we are able to do things online and continue that process of improving the operations as Honeywell progresses the markets. So it's been a terrific value for both the customer and for Honeywell to have that correlation. So like the says, customers helping customers. That's exactly what we're doing as a committee. Honeywell doesn't tell us what to do. We tell them what we think is best for the customers, and that's how that global customer committee, as time permits. Next slide, please. So one of the things our firm does, and I've been with the firm now 3 years, they brought me on because of my experience as a director of maintenance. They wanted to expand the technical services side to the firm. So one of the things I introduced was some additional benchmarking points that I felt we needed to capture so that our prospective clients that are looking to purchase aircraft have a better idea of what they should and shouldn't do with what the markets are showing. So what I have here is benchmarking data that was tallied from 2019 to 2020, and we found that 67% of all operators have some sort of maintenance program, whether it be engines, APU, avionics, or mechanical. And of those 67, 88% of them choose a program at time of acquisition. They seem to find that they don't want those, as Karen was explaining, those spikes in the budget. So they want to get in at time of acquisition when the cash tends to be available to them. And 80% of them enroll in at least an engine program of some sort. So that's a high percentage if you look at what the markets are doing today. And we're not seeing from our clients where they're looking to disband from any of those programs. They're usually adding, not subtracting. Next slide, please. So what I did was I wanted to categorize this into 3 columns. One being what the director of maintenance is and the decision makers that are maintaining the aircraft might want to look at in these programs, what the owners or the management companies are looking for in the benefit in these programs. And then during the transaction side of the business, when you're getting ready to buy or sell, what you might be looking for in the benefit of having these programs. So under the director of maintenance is important, as Karen was alluding to. You're wanting quality components for the exchange. And if you're going to, the only way you're going to be assured of that quality is if it's coming right from the OEM. And we as a committee are always looking at that. Like I was saying on the NFF side, we want to see that percentage down. 0 is our best, but we certainly get as close as we can as we watch those numbers come across. Under the AOG support, it's important to understand that if you're on a plan, you know, you are the priority now on the order process. So it gives you that benefit when you're looking to make those component parts available. Now, obviously, we all know that if you're on an OEM plan for your engines, we know that there's a limited inventory of engines that we are monitoring as a committee, also within the DCC. So we know what those numbers are, and I can assure you that being on an OEM program benefits you when you get on that priority list for an AOG. If you're not on it, we know that you go down to the bottom of the list. It's just the way the program works. So there's a tremendous benefit to have that. And when it comes to parts failures, if you're a company or an individual owner who is concerned about what's my budget for the next year going to be, especially under this environment, this is one way that you can capture that in a streamlined program, depending on how you decide you want to sign up for in the way of years of coverage. Now, when you look at it from the management side, or the principal, say the CFO who's looking at the cash flows that are coming in, there's some concerns around what the budgets are going to be year over year, and predictable cash flows is one of the first things they're always looking at. So when you're looking at the cost of the engine work or the APU, the more you can predict those numbers, the better off you're going to be. So these plans obviously give you a set figure on what you can budget for each plan, as Karen's examples on the 550 showed you. Event risk security, obviously, when you do have a high failure, obviously time is money, as Karen was saying, and you want to get it back online. Having those programs available, it's a one-call program. They're on it. You know that the parts are coming from the locations you're expecting it to come from, and there's no stopgap there in trying to get to a third party for approval. And residual value protection is something that is on every client's mind that we're seeing today. And when they're looking at putting an aircraft on a plan, the next thing they're looking at is, well, when I get ready to sell this aircraft, what's my impact going to be? We know what it costs me to operate under those years, but when I'm getting ready to sell, what can I expect from the market? And obviously from the market, if one is on plan versus one is off, that's the one that's going to be looked at first. When I'm going out looking at aircraft for clients, the first thing I look at is what plans are they on and how long are the coverages? And are they transferable? These plans are all transferable. So that's an important piece to this, so that you know that there's no gap in coverage. So it's a very comforting for me to recommend an aircraft knowing that these plans are there. And I'm working with a client right now who's got full coverage on a Gulfstream 4, and that's a peace of mind to them. They know what those budget figures are going to be. So it's very helpful to have that in your back pocket. So then when we transition over to the time when you want to either buy or sell the aircraft, Our asset management side of the firm looks at what the time on market, meaning that from the first day that you put the aircraft up for sale, first offer. And we've seen time and time again when they're on plans, that makes a difference on days on market. It's usually significantly shorter. I can't give you a percentage because that market changes all the time. You couldn't hold me to it, especially in this COVID market. We're seeing residual values of aircraft as a whole rapidly changing. But if on a plan versus off a plan, it's a noticeable difference. So the recommendation is to our clients is that you stay on those plans even during the transition. So the other that is when you're looking at leased aircraft, there are a number of clients that we work with, we lease turnbacks. And that's where the lease of the aircraft is up, the bank is now taking the aircraft back, and we have to go through that process, turning that aircraft. We as a firm represent the owners in those transactions. So we work with the banks in negotiating a pre-purchase inspection that has to be done for the covenant of the lease. And the first thing they're going to ask is, did you comply with the lease by having it on engine programs? That's a requirement in most leases. There are variances in what you're allowed, but we're always recommending that if you are returning an aircraft that's a leased aircraft, you want aircraft covered as much as possible, because those return costs on that lease can be dramatically expensive during that pre-purchase inspection when the aircraft is being handed over. So it's an important piece to understanding when you're on a lease that it's not that you don't have those same responsibilities and coverages. Costs after return can be dramatically higher if you're not having those particular areas of the aircraft covered. So it's important to understand that. So that's basically the overall goes into this process and works with making sure that we're always trying to get more when the opportunity presents itself. We recently, Paul stated that in a previous conversation I had with him that they've expanded the coverage now to cover L3 components on aircraft. You've got L3 items in your aircraft, also TCAS 2 and TCAS 3. So these are outside of Honeywell's production line, but still pieces that they felt were valuable, and I feel is valuable as a committee, that they need to continue to look at those areas and cover more of the aircraft when possible. So I think it's a great benefit. You're going to see changes down the line, and we're excited about the future for that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Paul.
Great, Peter. Can't thank you enough. I think these are very insightful experiences, and certainly your perspectives based on some of these program. What's the one thing that would make you convert to a program? Is it A, price? Is it B, streamline purchasing, low effort, automated? Is it reduced downtime? Is it obsolescent solutions? Or is it because it adds value at time of sell? Give it a few minutes here. Okay. Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much for responding to that. And so really just a couple of points here is, at the end of this time, is this the right time for a maintenance program? You got to ask yourself these questions. Seek out requests for quotes. It doesn't hurt to get the information in front of you from the industry providers. Look at your own data, look at your own records. How you spend your budget, what escapes have you had from previous years, and validate for yourself. Is your aircraft exiting the warranty period, or is the equipment exiting warranty and you don't have coverage? And again, these types of questions will help you to hopefully arrive at a conclusion that that makes sense for yourself. Timing may be good. Again, as we kind of get into returning the aircraft to pre-COVID missions and operations, to look at these alternatives. You may have time to do it now. And we recognize everybody's situation is different. I mean, this is, we have 18,000 aircraft flying around and not one program or one situation fits all. And if you've already, I know on this phone and based on Peter's data, suggests that you've already proceeded down this direction and have that type of coverage. Whatever you determine is the best solution for your operations, we certainly hope you remain safe and healthy, and hope that this has been value-added time spent today. And certainly from all of us today, we do want to thank you for taking time. It's difficult when we're not face-to-face and not able to meet and attend our MBAA conferences and operator conferences. And, we really are concerned with just making sure that you have data in front of you to make these types of decisions. So thank you again. And I'll turn it back over to Woodrow for a question and answer. And before we do that, this is our contact information. If you do have follow-up questions or would like to engage us in further explanation of programs, aircraft valuations, or anything that we can help you with, more than happy to help. And certainly appreciate you guys spending time reaching out and asking additional questions. So Woodrow.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so if anybody watching in the audience, viewers, please do submit your questions in the Q&A section. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can if you do have questions about any of the presentations we just witnessed. I'd like to start off with a follow-up question to actually something that you mentioned, Paul, so it's probably a good question for you. When you talk about the Honeywell maintenance program, if you could just, clarify for everyone in the audience, will that cover all the engines, components, and systems and parts that aren't produced by Honeywell? If they're manufactured by other OEMs, if you could just kind of
to do that. So really, we don't have a complete, comprehensive everybody's parts solution on each of the aircraft. Basically, we obviously have focused a tremendous amount of effort to make sure that exploring, so we understand, that customers, there's equipment in the cockpit that sometimes gets retrofitted, gets upgraded. There may be a shift or change in the OEM of that equipment, but nevertheless is still within that cockpit systems. And so what we're trying to do again is create a program that drives more efficiency and less effort on the director of maintenance to be able to have one push of the button to call into Honeywell and have that component covered. So we have launched a couple of programs. One's on L3, one's on Universal. We are looking at additional ones where it makes sense. So we're being very careful not to overstep and take on something that we can't support our customers with. So we're working in lockstep with these other OEMs, and where it makes sense, we're launching out. On the L3, for example, we do have directional antennas covered, as well as the TCAS 2s and 3s. And we thought that made sense. And in those cases, basically you still have one invoice, you pay it on the annual basis, and you're completely covered. You call L3 when you need a directional antenna or a box run, low effort, and they execute the exchange with you, and hopefully you see the benefit of that coverage.
And if I can interject there, Paul, from the committee's perspective too, you'll find that we work very hard in helping Honeywell align with their product roadmap and determining what they're going to be able to support over the years and what is going to need to go away because of vendor support changes and all those other factors. So we're really in line with Honeywell on that, and we do view these additional product lines that are non-Honeywell as a value added to the customer. So from the committee's perspective, this is something that we have a dialogue every time when we meet to talk about, and I know Paul can attest to that it's high on our priority to expand these programs as far as we think we can go.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and another example is we're launching out on our HTF fleet nacelle program as another service. So we'll be adding nacelle coverage to our HTF engine program, and again, so we got a complete system comprehensive coverage. So be looking for information on that, or if you're interested in that, certainly feel free to reach out to us as well.
It's a huge program that's going to be very value added to the end user.
We agree.
And we've got another question that was submitted about the poll question earlier about program obsolescence. So he's asking, can you give some examples of how a maintenance program can help with obsolescence?
I'll go ahead and take that one. So with the Honeywell Solution maintenance program, we have the opportunity to ahead of the game on upgrades, full upgrades. We also provide incentives to MSP customers to upgrade their full cockpit or a part that's gone obsolete, and to bring an incentive back because they are a maintenance service plan customer that we show to them. Another option is that we have solutions where they can, for your period, sign up and upon failure, upgrade their part. These are extended programs, riders, as you will, to the main program that give another choice. So we're all about trying to give the right choices. We know obsolescence happens. It just is the name of the game with electronics. And so we're exploring new areas that we can get to fit in, and not just to be a set of the day, oh my goodness, this component is obsolete and the only thing I can do. Although that's always an opportunity and a choice of theirs, we also offer other opportunities for the MSP customers to be able to choose upgrade paths. So hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, and just to add on that too, certainly it was a big topic within the GCC relative to product roadmaps and making sure our customers are getting information out on when the part is going obsolete through our service information letters, et cetera, and getting the customers getting out in front of these ahead so that you have time to plan and time to understand the impact of what that obsolescence means relative to that aircraft platform. And so obviously you're going to upgrade, you're going to go ahead and cash out and upgrade the cockpit. If you're kind of in that indecision mode, as Karen had indicated, and you just need protection, if you're not sure if you're going to keep the plane, sell the plane, you got a budget issue, et cetera, then again, this is where we're able to add on a potential for coverage here.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Woodrow.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Peter if he could share times like these, this is kind of what this webinar is about, a downturn in business, crisis of our environment. I know you've seen this in the past. You've experienced this as a DOM. What was your experience with that? And how did you sell your principles on getting into a maintenance program, whether it be a Honeywell solution or another solution?
That's a good question, Karen. I can tell you that in most cases, the clients aren't looking short term when it comes to operating their airplane. And in having this discussion, we're looking at coverages that are going to not be something that will impact you within the next 6 months because you're not operating the aircraft to the level it may have been operated before this whole COVID started. But the idea behind this is to sell it on its protection over the life of the ownership period, not over what COVID's doing to you right now. Because there's so many other factors that COVID is affecting in the industry. But to shortchange the aircraft because you need a bottom line change in your numbers will, in the long period, be more difficult to program. It doesn't make much sense to come off of it just because COVID is in the environment. So that's the way we approach it to the client, is we get them to understand that let's look beyond the next 6 months and see what we need to do to make sure that we've got reliability and sustained costs across the board.
Okay. So another question, and I'll throw this open to the panel. Kind of a generic question about the aircraft on ground aspect of your maintenance plan. If you do have experience in aircraft on ground problem, right before takeoff, maybe an hour or two, and you have your high and help that type of situation.
Well, I can tell you as an operator, it's happened to me many times. And when you have the opportunity under a plan and you're in an event like that, you get an immediate case that's listed within Honeywell that tells them that, okay, we have an aircraft on the ground, so it gets posted to a higher level. Once you put your contract in there, now you're at another level because they know that you're one of the partners that they're supporting. So they then increase that, and you at that point have direct communication with whoever's trying to get you that part. Or if it has to be a field service technical operations person that's got to come in to help you with the troubleshooting portion of it, which can be the beginning stages of then the part ordering process. If you're not on a plan, you're going to have to go back in the area that can support you, what their knowledge base is, and whether they can handle that aircraft troubleshooting piece. Whereas if you're working with Honeywell directly, they have the networks that they can go out to help you recover knowledge that's in that area, or through the Phoenix office itself to help you troubleshoot it and then determine what the AOG status is on the parts ordering process. So you have clear view of what's happening during that process when you're under the plant, and you know who to talk to. They're very forthright about availability, and you're talking to the source.
Yeah, good. I'll just add just a couple other pieces of that as well. Certainly, being able to respond quickly is critical. One of the things that we did in the GCC with the help of Peter and that advisory board was developed a mobile app, Direct Access. That Direct Access allows you to basically carry Honeywell with you in your pocket, in the cockpit, wherever you're at. When you do have that sort of failure, obviously time becomes of essence, right? I mean, at the end of the day, your principal has that tool. He's planning to be. Timing is of the essence. So what we're trying to do is make that super easy for us to have a one button to push on this mobile app to reach AOG and or to reach technical support and or to find the nearest road team through our authorized service center network to go and deploy at your next stop in the flight schedule if you can defer. So that means as possible scenario and be able to transact that maintenance event for you.
I think would be cool here for third-party approval. That's a pretty interesting aspect. You can maybe expand on that a little bit more, maybe starting with Peter. How does that process usually work if you don't have a maintenance plan? What is the third party that's involved in approval when you do need new parts?
That's a good question. Depending on the component that you're ordering, obviously if it's an air cycle machine, some of the numbers that Karen was alluding to, over $100,000 on an exchange. So if you, depending on what your authority is on partnering within your maintenance department, mine was at 100,000. So if I go up above that, I have to get somebody else's company to approve that component. I can't just order it. And that was the processes that were in play, companies that I worked for. So if you're under the plan, you don't have to do that because you now have Honeywell directly working with you on just getting you the part. Nobody's worried about the cost at that point. Obviously they're going to be following through with you on, did it fix your problem? You've got to work through that. That's part of the case numbers that you post when you order the parts so that they're aware of what you're doing, so that Honeywell wants to make sure that it did actually solve your problem. They don't just try to get you the part, want to see the end result and then bring that information back even to our committee. We look at those two to make sure they're not looking at a systemic issue that is amongst the fleet, or if it's a one-off problem aircraft may have. But when it comes to ordering the part, if you're under the program, you don't need to get the rest of your corporate decision makers involved because of the cost associated with it.
But I mean, it's all about budget fidelity. You don't have the peaks and troughs relative to maintenance events when they happen. You budget it, you pay it one time, once a year, and you have complete coverage. All you need is that contract number. You call it the authorized service center or channel partner for help. You give them the number and $0 invoice at that point. So again, just really trying to create a low effort, really resolution from that point. Now, on the third party parts that we do cover, just to add clarification on that piece. So the inventory index on that third party solution, what we do is again, we allow that budgeting on an annual basis to be covered. So if you have that L3 component or universal component in your contract, basically all you do is you contact Universal or L3 and just give them that contract number, and they transact it from their spares roll inventory and get you back operational again.
Just one last, I'd like to just add to all of that with the MSPs in general, right? The whole idea is that you are already covered and that there aren't surprises. You've put into your budget, you've planned for that, and then whatever happens after that, you're going with that plan to protect you, right? So there's not all these daily decisions as occur without a maintenance service plan. So, one of the things I would like to ask the audience, the participants here, is really just to dare to compare, to take what has my aircraft, what is my annual expenses, how long do I plan on keeping this aircraft? Am I going to sell it? Is this going to be something that will be positive when I do go and sell it? Peter alluded to that a little bit. Take all of this information and kind of wrap it up into how do you best want to protect yourself? How do you best want to run your flight department without all the surprises, without all the scurrying, without all of the panic-driven mode that failure brings. Behind all that is the support that the solution brings, right? Honeywell's solution brings all of that support through a 24/7 AOG. I know there's other maintenance service plans out there, and this was all about getting on a maintenance service plan, right? Honeywell has been here to provide our solution. Whatever you choose, I think being on a maintenance service plan takes the homework, and it's really worth looking into that. And if you have any questions, I know I'm available to walk you through that. Peter would probably be available to walk you through them. I'm volunteering you, Peter.
Absolutely.
And Paul as well, because we've been in this for years and we've seen it and we've seen the advantages and we believe in the solution. So I just kind of wanted to wrap up a little bit with that, and just let you know that if you have those questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We're happy to talk to anybody.
Okay, well, that brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. I wanted to thank all the viewers for tuning in today. I think we learned a lot about having a maintenance plan in this current environment. And I want to thank Honeywell Aerospace, all of our speakers today, Paul and Peter. Thanks for the information provided. We will be making this available on replay to all the viewers, and I'm sure they will make these slides available to you as well. So thanks again for tuning into today's webinar.
I think we had one other polling question. Was that all right?
Oh, is there one? Okay.
Yeah, there's one more, and I'll read it just real quick. We just at the conclusion of this, after participating in this webinar, would you consider starting a maintenance program in this environment? If you just take a few minutes for that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you should see the polling question now on your screen. We'll give a minute or two for people to answer that. But yeah, thanks again to all the speakers today. Very, very pertinent information. I think very timely presentation on this topic.
And thanks to Avionics International. We certainly appreciate that. Your help.
Yes.
Yep. Oh, we got a good read on that last question. Thank you all for joining us, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you, Avionics International.